Well, hello class, and welcome to the middle of Unit 6. Hope you're enjoying kind of a lower key unit this unit, as we're not engaging in conversation with classmates, but really just kind of digging deep and looking at some artifacts. I'm looking forward to seeing what all of you post by the end of this week here at the end of Unit 6. So I want to talk about two main ideas, two main questions. Okay, so first of all, let me just once again reiterate, thank you. This has been just a phenomenal semester of incredible thought and learning. Some of you were just asking some just amazing questions, making some great connections and comments, and I really, really enjoy what I'm seeing so far, so thank you for that. I'm going to speak to two questions, and these two questions were asked by the same person, and they're, I think, really insightful questions, but I think these questions speak to some of the questions, the concerns, maybe the issues that you plural, many of you, if not all of you, are actually thinking about yourself. So let me just get right into it. If I have time, I'll get to some others, but I think I really just want to focus here. I want us to, again, not take up too much of your time, but I want to speak to a couple things. I think these are really important questions. So the first question is this. It's from page 72 of LibTech. And he goes into some detail, the nature of career pattern, okay, and goes on. You can read through all that. But then the question is this. It seems to have a bit of an apple does not fall too far from the tree approach, and insinuates the client's potential future is predetermined by where they come from and the circumstances they're exposed to. It seems to limit a client's future potential. Does this theory give room for growing beyond these career patterns? Okay, that's a great question. I guess there's probably multiple questions in there. So those are great questions that are being asked. So theory, Kurt Lewin talks about how, I love how he says that there's nothing so practical as a good theory. I love theory. I love philosophy. I love to theorize about many, many things. I love to philosophize about all sorts of content and so forth. I just really, really love to think from a theoretical framework standpoint. However, theory without practice is merely just this pie in the sky kind of pious, like, oh, this is so much fun, and it expires, right? So we just kind of continue to talk in circles. And that's fun to an extent, but if we're going to think about how does this practically play out in our everyday lives as we're counseling clients, where the rubber hits the road, right, the proof's in the pudding, you're in a very practical, professional, pragmatic degree, we can't just think about theory. So we could take theory, and theory does inform practice. And I would argue, in looking at this, as we talk about this theory that's being referenced in the question that's being asked, we would then go, okay, I think the line of questioning is right. Does it insinuate, okay, that the client's potential future is predetermined by where they come from and the circumstances that they are exposed to? Is it limiting in any way, shape, or form the client's future potential? And does there give room for growth? Does there give room for opportunity? I certainly hope that we're not kind of saying, well, because of where you're from, you don't have any opportunities. We hear stories all the time about people that have kind of not necessarily pulled themselves up from the bootstraps, but they have they've worked hard, and they've made it out of poverty. They've made it out of hard places, right? We hear these stories. We don't hear these stories nearly as much as I'm sure we would like to hear them, but we do. Okay, so I'm going to share with you, I think this is a great question, because I think what it does is it gives us pause. At least it gives me pause, and it goes, okay, so what am I doing to make a difference in the lives of individuals around me from a work standpoint, right? Am I encouraging individuals to think broadly, right? So in the work that we do from a career standpoint, I feel like we're walking a very fine line between building false hope and outright crushing dreams, right? If someone comes to me, I can't tell them in good faith, with good conscience, I cannot say to them, you can be anything you want to be. I just don't think that statement's true. There are certain things that we simply cannot be. I think you could say there are most things are not outside of your reach. What do you want to do? Let's dream big, right? But I can't, build up this false hope and tell them that they can be the president of the United States of America. There's lots of reasons why you couldn't be. You're not 35. You were a natural born citizen, right? So if you're not those things, you can't be those things, right? You can't be the president. There's lots of other things that you simply can't be, right? If I want to be a doctor, I can't be a doctor, right? Because I didn't go to medical school, and I'm pushing 40 years old, and I'm probably not going to go. I guess I could, but let's be realistic at the same time. But what we can do is we can help individuals to not just dream big, but to dream big realistically, and then to give hope, but not say, well, you can't be anything. Let's think about some realistic kind of practices or approaches to work that you think would be fulfilling, that you could accomplish, right? If you know that certain degrees or certain jobs take certain degrees, and like if I wanted to be a nurse, my wife's a nurse. If I wanted to be a registered nurse myself, I would have to go to nursing school, right? And I'd have to like deal with blood. I don't like blood. I pass out at the sight of blood, so I probably wouldn't be a good nurse. So I can't be anything I want to be. But let's think realistically. But how are we helping individuals to think from a career development standpoint? You're not limited to what you've seen, right? You're not limited to your zip code. You're not limited, just because you happened to be this doesn't mean that you can't be that, right? We see all of these stereotypical, we see all of these, even gendered norms when it comes to work, or even personality norms, right? So outgoing, more extroverted individuals, they make the best leaders. Really? I don't think so. Well, you're not a man, so you can't be the CFO of this organization. Wait, hold on. Says who? So according to whom, right? So what are we doing to combat some of these things, right? There's some hands that we've been dealt in life, this circumstantially, environmentally, and then there's certain things that we just simply cannot change, right? So what are we doing as potentially as career counselors? How are we playing a role to make a difference? So I want to show you this book. You can kind of see it. It's by David Bluestein, called The Psychology of Working. And Bluestein years ago came up with, I can't recall if it's any of the literature we look at this term, but it's a theory called the communitarian approach. And some folks, it tends to, at least historically when I used the book that talked about it, it was a point of contention, because a number of folks were saying that it was arguing for socialism, which it simply was not doing. But what it was doing is it was saying, what are we doing? What role are we playing as career professionals to make a difference and help provide opportunities for folks that may not have those opportunities? You'll remember years ago when President Obama was in office, he said, if you have a business, you didn't, he basically, he came under fire. If you have a business, you didn't build it. And so people are like, whoa, hold on, buddy. We live in a capitalistic society. Of course I built that thing. I pulled myself up from the bootstraps. That was my business. I built it, and I don't like what you just said. That's not what he was getting at. At least I don't think so. I think, in his brilliance, he was kind of thinking, how am I going to play with these words to get people to think about this? And so did people think about it? Absolutely. Did they talk about it? You bet they talked about it. Some very vehemently, some very adamantly, but it was still being talked about. So as I think about where I am today, all the graduate school I've completed and the work that I've done and the positions I've held and all those different things, I may have a couple of pieces of paper on my wall that say Jeffrey Boyan completed this degree or that degree or that degree. Okay, that's true. But I know just as much as you know, if you're going through this program with somebody or some buddies in your life, you ain't doing it just by yourself, right? There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of people supporting you, propping you up, encouraging you, making you coffee in the middle of the night, getting you food, whatever it is, right there. You can do this. They're cheering you on from the sidelines. We need people to do that. And so I believe that we, as career professionals, if you choose to go into this role, in this world, we get to play, albeit a small role, in helping to do the same thing with people that may come from a more disadvantaged background. We get to play a role to support them. So is the theory at hand talking about limitations on people? Potentially. But I hope more than anything we take the theory, we read through that, and we go, okay, so based upon what I'm reading, it's telling me that there might be some limitations on individuals coming from, certain areas of the world, certain backgrounds and so forth. But I'm going to do what I can to help them think broadly outside the box and realize that they can actually do more than they think they can. All right, the communitarian approach, David Bluestein. It's worth checking out. It's actually really interesting to take. And it talks about more public policy than anything. That's the subtitle of this book, A New Perspective for Career Development, Counseling, and Public Policy. It's the psychology of working. Asking the question, what's the role that career professionals play and helping other people to get jobs. And sometimes that means by way of, help, truly, going to bat for somebody, and providing opportunities for folks, putting your neck on the line sometimes. Maybe not selecting, certain groups of people to go for interviews. I mean, obviously we want people that stand on their own 2 feet, but what are the metrics by which we're choosing people, right? So, and what role are we playing to make a difference? There's lots of questions that are circling around this, and I think that if we limit what a theory says, oh, you came from this, you can't be that, that's wrong. And I think if we're in the forefront of the work in career development, we can actually provide opportunities to help support individuals to make it out of some of the harder backgrounds they may have come from, so they can go on and make a difference and then pay it forward to other people just the same. Fantastic question. I know it's a lot of words. I hope it was helpful. Remember that book, David Bluestein, The Psychology of Working. Great text. Second question. It seems to me, and there's a story of Kathy on page 81. She took several assessments, and I love how it doesn't say test. Thank you for that, lip tack. Now that you've taken several assessments, let's look at the results. It seems to me that having a client take several assessment tests could be potentially overwhelming. Wouldn't it be better to narrow the field, only do a couple? So here again, it's going to really kind of be based on what the counselor wants to do, right? What's their approach? But ultimately, I would think it comes down not just what the counselor says, but what does the coachee or the counselee say? What does the client say? So I think I've mentioned this before, I've moved away from using assessments. I am certified in just a grip of assessments, Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, Career Leader, and so, I mean, you name it, there's a number of them. Arsenal, there's all sorts of them that I can use. Strong interest inventory, great assessments, by the way, they're fantastic. But I find in my work that having discussions and maybe referencing some of that content, that's actually more helpful. The other reason I don't do it is because those assessments cost a great deal of money. So if I'm working in corporate, I might have some folks go through and take the assessments. If I'm working nonprofit, depending on if it's a team or not, I might have them do it. But if I'm with an individual, I'm likely not going to have them complete an assessment because they're already trying to figure out maybe how to get a job because they're out of work, maybe how to get a better job because they're not getting paid enough in their current job, and they're paying a pretty penny to work with me. So if I can, in any way, shape, or form, which kind of goes back to the previous question, reduce the overall cost, then I would do that. Some people love assessments, and some people, I would argue, in working with a coach and working with a counselor, they want to take assessments. They want to take a lot of assessments. I would offer this up. Think about it strategically. Is there anything wrong with taking a number of assessments? No. If they're interpreted well, and I would argue if there's an intersection between the content. So for instance, the StrengthsFinder and the MBTI. There is great overlap between those two assessments. Great overlap. And if you understand both really well, you can actually connect them in some pretty powerful ways to help your client think about what it is that they might want to do for work. Now, if these are two completely disparate assessments, I might caution against doing the both of them because it's going to potentially distract or confuse them because they're not directly connected enough, right? So if the client wants assessments, as long as there's an argument to be made, it's not being kind of forced upon them, if you will, and it's going to be beneficial to their overall thought process and their career development, thinking, and learning, I think it's okay. But I think the question's right. I would caution to make sure that you're doing them not just to fill time, not just because you think they're the right thing to do, but I would caution, make sure that you're doing the assessments, whether one or a number of them, because you know that it's going to actually benefit the client. If it doesn't benefit the client, it's not worth doing, bottom line. So it might make you as the counselor more money, especially with some of these assessments. Myers-Briggs, I have friends that charge up to $250 just to interpret the assessment. And that's on top of the cost of taking the assessment. And they have every right to do that, but that's expensive. And so I would encourage you, if there's ways to talk about it, and if they're not actually taking the assessment but still getting some of the content, I would say that might be the better approach. Or some of the assessments like the one we did in the Wellbeing Index. If there's a book that comes with it, that's something that they can keep with them for quite some time. Or the StrengthsFinder. The MBTI is great, right? It's helpful. It gives you a baseline understanding, but it's not gospel truth. So it's kind of a hit or miss. It depends on the needs of the client It depends on the approach that the counselor takes. So great questions. Hope you're having a great unit. I look forward to seeing you online for the rest of this week.